Space represents many fears that humans have: the fear of being alone, the existential dread of knowing that we are nothing but specks of nothingness in a infinite galaxy. And that galaxy is nothing but a speck within an infinite universe. But even simple things like the dark, the loneliness, the knowledge of your physical weaknesses, your need for oxygen, your need for warmth, all these things help build the tapestry that is cosmic horror. And all these things are connected through one other major concept: the unknown. What is out there? Is it friendly? Is it hostile? Who is out there? We don't know. There is so much horror to be found in the vast emptiness of space. And there are many authors and many directors who've covered stories that cover numerous fears, dangers, threats, and even explore the human psyche. However, this movie throws all that out the window so we can have a cheap slasher. Yay! That's right, people. We're looking at Jason X, and you know what? It's gonna suck. Released in 2001, Jason X is the 10th entry in the Friday the 13th franchise, though they couldn't say Friday the 13th due to a rights issue between New Line Cinema and Paramount. The director, James Isaac, is probably better known for his visual effects work, though he did direct a few movies, and unfortunately passed away in 2012. However, I don't think you're here for minor factoids about the all-Canadian cast, because it was cheaper to hire local talent in Canada than to actually work with American actors in American sets. You want to know about the plot. And I have one question for you. Are you serious? The plot? Fine. I'll synopsize it as best as possible. It begins in the futuristic year of 2010 at the Camp Crystal Lake research facility where they're doing experiments on Jason. He breaks free, kills a bunch of people, and thankfully a scientist is there to activate the deep freeze system, cryogenically freezing Jason Voorhees and herself. We skip to the very futuristic year of 2455, where a spaceship crew stumbles across this facility, scavenges for things, and brings back both Jason Voorhees and the scientist. Jason, of course, gets unthawed and goes on a murder spree, featuring some very, very gory deaths, many of which are done with digital effects that have not aged great. And the survivor from the cold open, cold because she was cryogenically frozen, I see what I did there, ends up guiding the remaining members of the crew to try to escape the ship before Jason murders all of them. Of course, it ends with your traditional horror sequel bait, and only a handful of the characters survive. But hey, it's a slasher movie in space. What did you expect? We have a cast of, oh, who cares? Every one of these characters is just a filler archetype from your standard slasher movies. You have the last girl, you have the nerd, you got the horny couple, you got the guy who's in it for himself, you got the tough guy. It's all the stereotypes are here. The only thing that makes it unique is one of the characters is a robot. That's pretty cool. But overall, these characters are just stock fill-ins for the body count. This is the slasher movie after all. Our characters don't need any kind of real deep character development, and even the best examples of the genre don't have a lot of character development or backstory for their heroes and heroines, because the main star of a slasher movie is the monster, and in this case we have Jason Voorhees, played once again by Kane Hodder. He brings some really good energy to the role, having moments of using eye twitches and just simple body movement to really convey not only what Jason is feeling at the moment, but also to give him a more imposing nature that makes him feel like the threat that he should be. In fact, when he gets shot up or blasted by someone or beaten, you can almost hear Jason say, "Are you kidding me? I'm freaking Jason Voorhees." There's definitely a good intimidation factor that Kane Hodder brings to the character, and even some humor with the way he kills certain people, especially the look in his eyes when Jason is trapped inside a hologram world of Camp Crystal Lake and goes to town on the holographic campers. Strangely enough, Jason might be the most well-developed character in this entire movie, which is kind of bizarre to think about, considering he has no lines of dialogue, and he mostly spends his time walking around brutally murdering people. And yet, he's super compelling as that killing machine. I got to admit, Kane Hodder actually gives life to a character who doesn't speak and spends most of his time skulking around. Good on you, Kane Hodder. One of the things that makes or breaks a horror movie is the music and the visual effects. The music is more or less forgettable. However, we do get tones and themes from previous Friday the 13th movies, allowing us to feel that Jason Voorhees type theme and having some good moments of intensity when Jason is fighting against the soldiers on the ship. It isn't a groundbreaking soundtrack by any means, but for what it is, it's fine. The soundtrack is primarily made up of guitar riffs, synth tones, some drum work, a little bit of vocal clips, and it works for what this movie is. They don't go and try to shove in some rap music or some hard rock song. There is no man behind the mask at the end of this movie, but it would feel really out of place in a Jason in space movie. Well, actually, it would feel right in place considering how usually stupid a lot of those theme songs they make for horror movies tend to be. As for the visual effects, we have a real mix here. Some of the stuff looks pretty good even today, like some of the nanomachines rebuilding the limbs and what have you and healing the cuts. But we also have a lot of CG stuff that has not aged well. Considering this was made in 2001, 20 years has not been kind to what CG was back in the day. And a lot of things like the space station, the ships that you see floating around in space, some of the deaths, and even some of the parts of the hologram training facility all don't look that great. It's hard to rip on a movie for having cheap, bad CG when it was made in an era where CG was just in its infancy. On the other hand, nearly all the special effects in the previous 9 films were done via good old-fashioned makeup and proper effects training. And considering the fact that the director was a visual effects artist, you think that maybe, just maybe, they might stick with that. But in order to keep costs down, they've decided to rely on a lot of CG, and some of it aged terribly, making this movie a bit more comical than it probably intended. The movie had an $11 million estimated budget, and only came in around $8 million on its opening weekend, with a domestic gross of about $13 million and a worldwide gross of $17 million. The movie was critically panned and was considered a financial failure. However, Jason X is one of the most financially successful movies in the franchise because its home media sales more than tripled the budget of the movie. This is one of those cases where word of mouth and home video sales definitely took that movie well beyond what its theatrical run would lead one to believe. However, despite the fact that we had a sequel-bait ending, New Line Cinema felt that the movie was not financially successful enough to warrant a Jason 11 or Jason X2 or whatever they would have called the follow-up to Jason X. It's easy to see why critics panned this movie. Some of the special effects are a little cheesy, the plot is nothing to write home about, the acting is mixed, with some people giving decent performances and other people, well, just hired to fill a role and get killed off immediately thereafter. However, the one thing critics tend not to take into account is the camp factor of the movie. Even when it was released, this movie is a bit of a farce, making fun of the tropes of the Friday the 13th franchise. And if anyone had a question about that, just watch the holographic Camp Crystal Lake scene and tell me that's not throwing a little bit of shade on the previous entries in the franchise. The movie wasn't meant to be the scariest movie you've ever seen. It was not meant to be a thriller that would be remembered throughout the ages as being the gold standard by which to make a thriller. No, this was a self-aware horror comedy. Critics didn't pick up on that, but audiences obviously did, which is what led to the growth in the home video sales. It's also the reason why you'll still see the movie aired on various streaming services, various movie channels, and various cable channels, because it provides a very campy and entertaining way to spend an hour and a half. If you're going to watch Jason X, you got to come in with the right mentality. Don't think that this movie will be as serious as the earlier entries, and don't think of this movie as a full horror comedy like an Evil Dead or Dale and Tucker versus Evil. Think of it more as a self-aware but very fun romp with Jason in space. And to be honest, this is probably the best of the in-space horror movies that weren't originally based in space. Oh wait, I'm a critic type person and I hate movies like this because there wasn't any major drama and the characters didn't have major character development. Boo! Worst movie ever. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Tell me what your favorite Friday the 13th movie is in the comments. And if you have a chance, check out our description for ways to support the channel. Until next time, have a wonderful Summerween, and I'll be back very soon with another spooky movie review. Until then, I'll see you at the tavern.